Hey guys, today I wanted to talk about uh, me building the Quest Mill Handlock into what it is today, how it evolved, how it started, what my initial experiments were, and how it kind of grew into the powerhouse, one of the most dominant decks. It's pretty much that in D6 on the ladder right now, and the only reason it's not more down is D6 is favored against it. Just probably, in my opinion, the best deck in the game, and there's a lot of data to support that. But it's what didn't start off that way. It started off decent, but it was a very kind of different style, a different control. But I wanted to go through kind of where how I designed it and how it kind of evolved over time. And I think this is just going to help you if you're a deck builder yourself. I want you to see that deck building isn't a 1-0 process. You don't just come up with an idea. You have a few ideas and then or maybe a general idea overall, and you keep adjusting and adjusting. And that's how I've built decks. That's how I've built a lot of top tier decks. It's not this I just came up light bulb. It's idea on top of idea on top of idea. So what I find cool about being able to look at the history of the decks is that you can really see where the deck has come from. And I can see all my old lists and how it evolved and changed over time. And you can see, so day one, I kind of start off with, this is the build that I was kind of evolved when I started off from my Theorycraft stream. I had a day ahead, but this is not a top tier deck. But the reality is, all I wanted to do is I knew the quest was a powerful enough win condition to win as long as I could control the board, winning in fatigue. So I was looking to fatigue quickly and just control the board. And I was trying to use a lot of the new powerful cards. I liked using Raised Dead to get more cards as well, and to get Bristlebacks and Barons, though. I was just kind of, what the main thing I wanted was 1, Soul Rinse, 2, Bristlebacks, 3 the Scavengers and the Quest. Those are like the main powerful things, and then you have all these powerful accessories. You have Touch of Nerazim. That's an incredibly powerful control tool for heal and killing minions. You have Backfire, which is a great draw tool that advances your quest. And then I was kind of filling in the dots. So Raised Dead wasn't quite that great yet, but I still was like, well, if you can get a Barons or a Bristlebark, that's huge. So, and Bloodbounded was a helpful thing to complete the quest. And that was the idea. Just complete the quest and kind of control the board. And this was just kind of, I was trying out new cards, new powerful things. Same things like the Demonic Assault, but the deck later evolved into something else. But you can see on day 2, I kind of play around with these Entitled Customer. There's actually a good amount of aggro and rogue on day 2. So I'm kind of I cut one in Demonic Assault because I'm getting it from Raised Dead's less. I put an Entitled Customer. And then I end up putting Breaker Bets because there's just a lot more aggro. And if we go to the final version of kind of what sort of, not day 2, this is the end of day 1. I was playing all day. This is kind of what I had. I still have 1 Demonic Assault. I've cut 1. It's not that great, but I haven't quite figured out what to replace it with, how I'm building. And the biggest weakness of this deck is it's just winning too slowly. It's a good control deck, with a powerful late game win condition, but the reality, even tapping and fatigue, which is in theory really, really strong, is just not beating Mage. But at the time, I was playing Quest Rogues, I was playing all this other stuff, so this was working on day 1, but I started to play it on day 2, and it wasn't working because Quest Mage was everywhere. But reality is, on day 1, this was quite powerful. Though not as, I think, strong as the other archetypes, but it still had some powerful things. I put Spicy Bread Baker in. This allowed with Raised Deads to do many of those, just massive amounts of heal. I still have 1 Demonic Assault. That's going to be one of the first things I cut in future versions. And I'm still running this Cornelius and this Entitled Customer. Still playing very defensive and having lots and lots of clears, going for that fatigue win condition, but playing a lot more defensive because the meta got on day 1 was actually quite aggressive. It hadn't quite gotten solitaire yet. Day 2, however, everything changed. So one thing to note is I'm doing research on day 2. I sleep on it and I kind of see what cards are performing well in Warlock, and I do some research, and so you can see I kind of play around with some zoo variants, and I try some ideas. I have a thing of like, maybe I can make this a soulbound ash tongue work, which I think somebody tried eventually. I tried some of these more zoo variants, and I couldn't quite make it work. It wasn't on the original style of the deck, but I was trying that, and eventually people did make a zoo style that was actually good. Mine was kind of meshing too many ideas, wasn't consistent going for the zoo style, trying to use Tamsin and the zoo stuff. It didn't quite work. But I did get for that as like, I should be running Flesh Giants. And at the time I was going for the Fatigue win conditions, I was like, do I really need Flesh Giants? But I was like, these Flesh Giants are just so good. So I kind of, after I tried a good amount, and this is like 7 games of me just fooling around, I went back to the old style, but now with Flesh Giants. And let me show you what that version looks like in the game. So this is the kind of version, and you can see it's almost getting there. And matter of fact, honestly, you could play this list on ladder today. I'm surprised I was able to come to this so quickly. But I believe I cut out the Demonic Assault. What else did I cut from yesterday's version? I was running a Hysteria. Some cards I was playing with defensive, and all of a sudden it was a solitaire meta, so those cards were not that useful. And I knew with the Flesh Giants, well, the last thing I want is a Voidwalker in the Flesh Giant pool. So I kind of was thinking also of the Bread Bakers, that discounts the Flesh Giant, which is very valuable. So you can already see, and I'd already been running Blood Mage. This is almost the full deck, and I'm surprised how fast I was able to come. This is the day 2. And it's but yeah, I just knew, I kind of did research. Flesh Giants are good. Battlegrounds Battlemaster is good. You can kind of pick up like some cards that are just strong, and you're like, hey, this is often the deck building where, Penflinger and Broom. Can I put the Broom in the deck? So can I put the Flesh Giant in the deck? Yes. Can I put the Battlegrounds Battlemaster in the deck? Yes. Hey, this actually works. It's not the zoo style, but so I kind of took some of that from the zoo style, but I made it into my own, into the control style, the way I wanted to play. But the reality is, so I was playing this style, and there was still lots and lots of mages. And while I was doing really well against other decks, I was not quite doing well against mages. So I started to adapt the deck, and I was trying very much to figure out what the next adaptation is. I believe I tried putting Bloodbound Imp back in the deck, but that didn't quite work. And then my next experiment was, I was like, well, maybe I put the Cult Neophytes in the deck, and that actually was very effective. So this is kind of, I think, if I look on the timeline, this is 24 days ago. The other one's 26, so this is day 3. Day 3 of the meta. I say, all right, I'm gonna put the Cult Neophytes in, and yeah, it's and this is almost all the cards, and I'm very surprised how fast this deck was made. But reality is, the Cold Neophytes happened to just work really well. I think at the time I even didn't play them right as well, but I was not doing the powerhouse plays where you play Flesh Giants and then you play Cold Neophyte with it. I was kind of just using it to try and slow Mage down. I didn't quite understand how to beat Mage, but I was just trying different things out. And I think that's often people, you don't have to have this master plan. You just say, okay, I'm not, let's try this out. Let's try this out. An hour of theory of testing beats 10 hours of theory crafting. So just start trying things out. You've got an idea, cut out something, put something in. And I think so, but yeah, this is most of the deck, and this is day 3. So there's a few more refinements that happen. So I'm trying to beat Mage here, and there's some experiments that actually the deck ends up going that direction later, but I end up going back because day 3 is kind of where I peaked as a deck builder. But there, I try Rethil Rod, I try cutting for this, I put a Rose of Protection in, I put a Narathon in, and one, I think cutting the Mortal Coil was a mistake. Mortal Coil is actually really, really good. Killing your own minions, cycling, really important. actually better than Shadow Blast, which gets cut as a one of later. But I tried the Narathon, and I kind of run into this problem with the Narathon and Rune Mithril Rod, where Narathon has anti-synergy. This is a big thing on deck building. So in Narathon, often, and this is a lot of when I made a Galakrond Warlock, I removed a lot of the anti-synergy from the deck. So in Narathon, you want to tap on 2, tap on 3, tap on 4, or sometimes, and then you can play it for 1. On Coin, you actually just can play it for 1 without even tapping. So it's really good with a double tap. But Rune Mithril Rod, often you want to go Coin Rune Mithril Rod or tap into Rune Mithril Rod, and that makes it so you can't play a Narathon on 4. So it's a huge anti-synergy. So I kind of ended up cutting a Narathon back because I was trying to figure out lineups, and I was like, I think this Narathon's really good, but it's not quite working sometimes. So the Xerios kind of figures out later, while I'm kind of moving other decks, I've kind of already say, okay, the other version's good enough for GM. I'm going to bring that. That other version that I showed you that I came up with on day 3 was what I was planning on bringing to GM. Because I was like, I'm not going to play this APM Warlock stuff. That is not my style. I don't think I can make that work. But yeah, so I have this, and then so this is ended up what I bring to GM. I realized I put a second Battlegrounds Battlemaster in, but then Xerios kind of at like around day 4, day 5 of the meta comes up with nulls and comes up with cutting the weapon. And oh, sorry about this. So Xerios, another very top tier streamer. Make sure to check him out in competitor. But he sort of, the thing I think he did that I just hadn't committed to and I was playing around with was cutting out the Rune Mithril Rods. The Rune Mithril Rods had like the anti-synergy, and at the time I was like, these cards are just too good to cut. But I think he cut them, and it was the right decision. Makes a Narathon a lot easier. And he ended up running the nulls, but I actually didn't like the nulls in the previous meta, at least at my leg. There was too much solitaire. I think the nulls are better against aggro. But I think the nulls got a lot better post-nerf. But this is kind of the final deck pre-nerf that I thought, or this wasn't it. Is this it? So, but this is kind of, if we cut this, and I believe we had another Battlegrounds Battlemaster. This is kind of and another Stable Blast. And this is kind of what I was running at the end of the pre-nerf before Flesh Giant got nerfed. And I think what's interesting about nulls are still, I think, on the margin. There's a version now that runs Mana Feeder Panthers and the weapon. So I think what's interesting about it is there are multiple ways to build it, but just figuring out often the cards, figuring out what cards work together and what cards to cut. Because sometimes you're like, this card is good, but it doesn't work. And I think the weapon just really doesn't work in the Narathon, but the Narathon's really, really good. And nulls are marginal too. They're solid, but you definitely don't want to run nulls and weapon, and you don't think you'd want to run at the Narathon a weapon. So you kind of have to commit to one way or the other. And just committing with the Narathon, I think, was the final touch on the package. But like I said, there's already a list that's running Mana Feeder Panthers, so there's already adaptations. The deck's still getting it better, but you get less and less returns usually as the farther the deck gets down. So the reality is you're cutting more and more the marginal cards. A lot of the cards have been figured out, and the deck gets a little bit better, but still, you can still make a nice improvement on a deck. But sometimes it's just marginal, and it doesn't really matter. But I think it just shows you the interesting thing about with either cutting the weapons or not, and committing to it, I think was a big lesson in deck building for the final touches for this deck. So you can see, I hope you guys like that, just talking about it and seeing how a deck is made. And I hope if you're a deck builder, go ahead and just start trying it. You just have an idea and you just keep working on it. It doesn't need to be perfect. Most deck ideas stink at the start. My deck idea was not killing it on day 1. On day 2, I was doing well enough because I'm a good player, but I don't think it wasn't a top tier deck at first. But I kept adjusting it, and then all of a sudden, it was one of the best decks in the game. So I think just having your own way of looking, saying, this is what I think is good. And remember, the cards that I thought were good were 1, the Quest is insane, Soul Rend is insane, Blood Sharper is insane, and Battleground Scavenger were insane. Those were the cards that I was all about. in when I was kind of thinking. So in most of those cards, only one of those cards was new, but I had already thought from previous expansion these cards are great, but the win condition for that, that 5-drop, I can't even remember his name. Let's look him up. And everybody would be like, "Oh, you should put this," and it was so bad. Yeah, this Naru Fireblade, terrible card. You don't even read it now, even because you're milling your deck. It's just bad. This card could be Battle Cry. Once you mill your deck, start opening the portals, and it would still probably be bad. It's just not reliable. If your opponent's if you're in fatigue against a control deck, they can often just start killing your boards over and over again, and they're 3/2s. You can't develop stuff, so you're kind of just relying on these 3/2s. You're taking damage every turn. Warlock is a class that needs health. Really bad card, but the other supports were insane. So I kind of recognized Solrend's insane, and Blood Shark and Barons, and that was kind of my brain, because a lot of people most people didn't recognize. Everyone wanted to go the Sealer of Souls way. So that's where you have your own perspective. So you can say, I think this card is great. I'm going to build a deck around it. I'm going to start this. I have an idea. I'm going to try to make these cards work together and just keep min-maxing. That's how I do it. You could see there was a natural evolution, but really all came down to just starting off with some powerful cards and then just putting these things and then slowly evolving into a more powerful win condition with cards that work together, getting better synergies, cutting out anti-synergies. So anyways, I hope you guys like that, and happy deck building. So